people, and how on earth do you follow that? I just wish I'd practiced a bit more. So the next session is going to be a question and answer, 10 minutes. Now, Chris Harvey, I think, sent to most of you who'd registered a question, which is, what would you like answered in terms of sleep and circadian rhythms? And these were the most frequently asked questions, and so I've got 10 minutes. Mark is going to set the clock going, and I'm going to try and answer as many of these 1 to 5 questions as I possibly can in the time that we have available. So let's kick off with the first one. Are these sleep monitoring devices that are now being sold actually of any use? And I guess we can talk about the scientific devices very briefly, and then touch on the commercial devices and how much they actually tell you. Well, just to remind you, we talked about polysomnography, the measurement of sleep using EEG, and this is sort of the traditional high-intensity EEG you get in the lab. And what we did, of course, with the children was this ambulatory EEG, and that gives you the sort of patterns that we talked about. You can even do it on babies, which I think is a lovely picture. And we talked about the variation that you get, and you can define the different stages of sleep, and that we talked about the REM, non-REM pattern, and the fact that we go through different cycles of non-REM and REM sleep throughout the night. And that's something that we've covered. Now, the first point I'd like to make is none of the commercially available devices can actually do this with any degree of accuracy. So they don't measure the gold standard of sleep. They simulate actigraphy. And Katerina showed you some pictures of these, which is essentially a movement detector, an accelerometer, and also some of them have a little light sensor. And so you can see activity here and rest here over a 48-hour time base. And these are a pretty good reflection of sleep-wake patterns and are used increasingly. And the great advantage of these, of course, is that you can go into the field, into the home environment, and monitor sleep-wake patterns over days and weeks. And that's what we have done for a whole range of different patient populations. Now, the devices that are available are the Apple devices, the Jawbone devices, and various other things. And you'll get a printout often which says something like, I can't see it from here, your deep sleep was 27 minutes and your light sleep was 4 hours. That's really something that we're not very comfortable about. These devices really are not sufficiently well equipped to give you that kind of information. And so the summary of comparing commercially available devices with the sorts of things that we'd use in the laboratory would be as follows. Based on the current research, if you sleep well, these commercially available devices perform similarly to actigraphy. If you want to know when you went to bed and when you woke up, broadly speaking, they're okay. So they're not a complete waste of money. However, if you sleep badly, they overestimate the sleep length and quality hugely. So what they're predicting is a standard sort of night of sleep. And if you fall outside of that, then the algorithms don't really work particularly well. So our conclusion would be, it's probably fine to get a commercial device for monitoring sleep out of interest, but not yet for research or in any clinical populations. And we could talk more about that if there's time later on. Okay, the second question. How much sleep do you need, and what can I do about my sleep? Many of you asked this question. Now, not getting enough sleep means that you need to assess your own sleep needs. We're very, very bad at doing that. And so the question you should be answering for yourselves would be, are you dependent upon an alarm clock or a parent or somebody else to get you out of bed in the morning? And my wife is in the audience, and she's laughing horribly at this point, because Lizzie is actually responsible for getting me out of bed in the morning. Do you oversleep extensively on free days? Are you oversleeping at the weekends? This is another really good measure of how much sleep you need. Do you take a long time to wake up? Is there a lot of sleep inertia? Do you feel sleepy and irritable during the day? Is your behavior overly impulsive? Are you doing stupid and unreflective things? Do you crave caffeinated drinks and sugar-rich drinks? And quite importantly, you need to listen to your friends and family. And if they notice changes in your behavior, are you more irritable, your loss of empathy? It's really quite remarkable how quickly our empathy falls apart with poor sleep. All of these are good signs of poor sleep. You're not getting enough. We've talked about teenagers a little bit, and I just wanted to show this slide, because the teenage world is late bedtime, and we'll hopefully get to some later slides explaining why there's a later bedtime. They have less sleep. They're tired during the school week. They then sleep in at weekends, which then results in a late bedtime. So there's a really nasty feedback loop that you see in teenagers, and indeed it's true of many adults. And so what do? You need to take some control. How do you sleep better? Some rules of thumb here would be your bedroom first must be a haven for sleep. I have to say there's some pretty dodgy practices in British bedrooms. And actually that came out rather badly. I didn't mean it quite like that. So the bedroom must be dark and it mustn't be too warm. And you can get these blackout blinds, which are really very effective. You need to calm down prior to sleep. It's crazy to think that, right, now I'm going to bed and I'm going to sleep. You need a winding down process. And some people benefit hugely from cognitive behavioral therapy to get a whole bunch of sort of behavioral traits in place to wind down in anticipation for sleep. You need to adopt a stable bedtime routine, which is similar to the sorts of things you need to do for cognitive behavioral therapy. Don't text, don't watch TV, get the television out of the bedroom, don't use computers, all that kind of stuff, at least 30 minutes before you go to bed. All of that should be turned off. Turn the router off, put it on a timer. Avoid bright lights 30 minutes before bed. We didn't really touch on this, but light levels are very important in increasing alertness. And it's really quite extraordinary. What's the last thing that most of us do before we go to bed? We stand in perhaps the most brightly lit room in the house, the bathroom, looking into a brightly lit mirror, cleaning our teeth. And of course, that will increase alertness and actually delay sleep onset. So try to clean your teeth before you go to bed under relatively dim light. Try not to nap during the day, or if you do need to nap sensibly. What I'm saying here is that naps no longer than 20 minutes can be quite useful. They will actually improve the second half of the day. The problem with naps is that it pushes back sleep pressure, which means that you'll go to sleep later, which means if the alarm clock is driving you out of bed at the same time, sleep duration will be shorter, you'll already have sleep pressure, you'll need a nap to compensate for that increase in sleep. That means you'll go to bed later, and so you can get into a nasty feedback loop with too much napping. So don't nap if you can possibly avoid it. Again, avoid caffeinated drinks after lunch, and avoid sedatives. So much of the developing world is stimulants driving the waking day. Then, of course, caffeine has a half-life in the body of between 5 and 9 hours. And then there's a tendency to use alcohol or indeed sleeping tablets as a sedative. They don't mimic biological sleep. So you then have sedated sleep. And in fact, alcohol can impede some of the important processes in the brain associated with memory consolidation and the processing of information. So the alarm clock drives you out of bed in the morning after a sedative-induced sleep. You need more stimulants, and that stimulant-sedative feedback loop is, of course, common in many adults, but increasingly in our teenagers as well. Seek out natural light in the morning, as what this does is adjust the body clock to an earlier wake time. So morning light is really important. Try and eat at the same time every day. Feeding rhythms can probably feed back on the clock and help consolidate sleep-wake timing. And also, if you can, exercise outside in the morning. How am I doing, Mark?
Very well.
Okay, question 3 then.
2 minutes is the answer.
Oh, Lordy. How much light do I need? Well, we talked about this. I just want to go back to this really important point here, that these photosensitive retinal ganglion cells need a big dose of light. And it is really quite extraordinary. By the window, we'll get 3,000 lux, but even just a few meters into the room, that can drop to 50 lux. So unless you're inside and next to the window, you're not getting enough light to reliably regulate your body clock and your sleep-wake cycle. And just to remind us, 300 to 400 lux is what you'd see in an average office. Home environments can be even less, but just to remind us, 10,000 lux is what you'd see outside, even in a shady environment. This is perhaps the most depressing image you'll see all day. I hope so. This is a nursing home environment. It's 2:20 in the afternoon, and these individuals are exposed to 20 lux. Absolutely extraordinary. And a colleague of mine, Aus van Summeren, went into a nursing home. He increased the amount of light in the day areas to 2,000 lux, and the bedrooms in darkness, and he absolutely had an incredible improvement on the sleep-wake behavior of these individuals. And those individuals who were suffering mild dementia, he increased their cognitive performance by more than 10%. So getting the light right inside, if you can't get outside, is critically important. Question 4. Yes, can I do this one quickly? Why do we dream? Just one quick image. So I have to say I take a very unromantic view of dreams. These are just the artifact of the brain trying to make sense of its world. All this stuff comes in during the day. We can't process it, so it's sort of put on hold. And it's rather like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. What the brain does at night is say, where does this gobbet of information, where does this bit of the jigsaw fit within the framework of what I've already remembered, and indeed what I might want to do next week or next year? Now, sometimes the brain, in trying to make sense of its world, will slot it in the right place. And so you'll wake up the next morning having resolved that long-standing question that you've wanted to deal with. But other times, those bits of the jigsaw are put into a part of the framework which is wrong. There are bizarre associations. And frankly, that's what I think dreams are. If dreams were really biologically important, we'd remember them. And most of the time we don't. So I'm sorry, it's desperately unromantic, but dreams are simply an artifact of the brain trying to make sense of our world during the sleep phase. Now, I know I've got to stop, so are there really morning and evening types? And if so, how? Yes, there really are morning and evening types. And if you want to know what you're like, go to this website here. It's the Munich Sleep Questionnaire. Just Google Munich Sleep Questionnaire, and you can go and see what your sleep-wake type is. Okay, I will stop. Thank you, Mark.